The vast darkness of space was silent except for the hum of engines and the low buzz of communication channels. Captain Vokter stood before the large viewport of his flagship, the Gorgon, watching as the planet Earth grew larger on the viewscreen below him. His gaze was cold, calculating. He had conquered countless worlds before, and Earth would be no different. The fleet behind him was a diverse one, each ship from a different species, each culture adding its unique flavor to the force gathered in space to invade this small blue world. They were prepared for anything. This would be another easy conquest to add to his illustrious record. His fleet was superior in every way, from their advanced weapons to their impeccable tactics. They had never lost, not once. They had wiped out entire civilizations without breaking a sweat. Now Earth's turn had come. Vokter turned from the viewport to face his officers. Their faces were serious, yet there was an air of boredom among them. They had seen it all before. The invasion plans were simple: strike fast, overwhelm their defenses, and bring the planet to heel within days. He spoke in a voice that cut through the tension in the room, his tone firm and unwavering. We proceed as planned. The humans will fall without resistance. Their defenses are non-existent, their technology primitive. We will crush them and claim this world for our people, he said with confidence. One of the officers, an alien with metallic skin and sharp angular features, nodded in agreement. Their history is short. They have no experience with advanced warfare. They are no match for us. Exactly, Vokter said. We've studied their planet thoroughly. Their best weapons are nothing compared to what we possess. We will face no challenge. The fleet began its final approach toward Earth. The vast armada of ships moved as one as they prepared for the landing phase. The ships gleamed under the stars, their designs elegant and deadly. But inside the vessels there was no excitement, no thrill, only the cold efficiency of an operation long rehearsed. Below on Earth, the planet's people went about their daily lives, unaware of the fate that awaited them. From the smallest child to the oldest elder, the cities bustled with activity, while the skies above were clear. Not a single soul knew that in the shadows of space, an empire was preparing to strike. Meanwhile, in a hidden underground facility in North America, a different kind of preparation was underway. It was not the military of any one nation, but a coalition of the world's best minds working together. They had known for months that something was coming. They had no idea how or when, but they had been preparing for a fight they couldn't win with conventional weapons alone. There were whispers of a secret project, a young genius who had shown the kind of brilliance that no one could have predicted. The humans had their own secret weapon, a child with a mind unlike any other. His name was Ethan. Back aboard the Gorgon, Captain Vokter's eyes narrowed as his ship approached Earth's orbit. He could almost feel the victory in his bones. His mind was already planning the celebration, the accolades, the trophies he would take from this world. But as he looked down at the pale blue dot before him, he couldn't shake a strange feeling in the pit of his stomach. Something was off, not much, but just enough to make him pause. The feeling was fleeting, but it was there. He shook it off quickly. No one had ever defeated him, no one ever would, and Earth would soon join the long list of worlds that had fallen to his superior force. With the first strike, Earth would never know what hit it. The war room buzzed with activity as human leaders from around the globe gathered in secret, far below the Earth's surface, in an underground bunker built specifically for a threat like this. They knew nothing of the alien forces that waited above, but they could feel it. The impending danger. Their best minds, their top strategists, their scientists, and military commanders all convened in a room surrounded by holographic displays and cutting-edge technology. Despite their uncertainty, there was one thing that united them. Humanity had to survive. Lieutenant Sarah Cross stood at the head of the table, her posture straight and her expression determined. A veteran strategist in her early 30s, she was the epitome of calm under pressure. Her fingers hovered over the command interface, bringing up tactical maps of Earth's cities and major military strongholds. She could see the potential devastation an invasion of this magnitude would bring, and the world's existing defense systems were nowhere near enough to stop it. "We don't know what we're facing exactly," Sarah said, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "But we know they have overwhelming force, and we don't have the numbers to match them." Her words echoed in the room, and there was a somber silence. Earth's military had been designed to fight human wars, not to face alien invaders with technology far beyond their own. Conventional weapons would be useless. Every attempt to stop them head-on would end in catastrophic failure. Sarah's eyes scanned the faces of the other officers, seeing the weight of the situation in their eyes. But then she shifted her gaze, a glimmer of hope in her own. "We need to think outside the box," she continued. "The one advantage we have is unpredictability. We need to create an environment where they can't rely on their advanced tech. We need to confuse them, make them question every move." A murmur spread across the room as the concept of psychological warfare began to settle in. Sarah wasn't suggesting they beat the enemy with brute force. Instead, she was proposing a strategy of misdirection, disruption, and sheer human ingenuity. As discussions on strategy continued, a young officer entered the room with a briefcase in hand. He approached Sarah with an air of urgency. "Lieutenant Cross, there's something you need to see," the officer said, placing the case down on the table. He opened it carefully, revealing a small device connected to a portable screen. He powered it on, and an image of a child appeared on the screen, a boy no older than 8. His eyes were bright, and his hair was unkempt, but it was clear he wasn't a normal child. "This is Ethan," the officer said, and there was a strange reverence in his voice. "He's a prodigy. His ability to understand complex military strategies and technology is unlike anything we've ever seen. He's been working in isolation for months now, developing tactics and solutions to our problems." The room fell silent again, and Sarah leaned forward, studying the image. The young boy was only a child, but the intelligence in his eyes was undeniable. She had seen great minds in her career, but this was different. Ethan wasn't just talented, he was a force of nature. Sarah's fingers hovered over the holographic interface, bringing up data on Ethan's cognitive abilities. His IQ was off the charts, and his mastery of military simulations and alien technology had already begun to impress even the most hardened generals. "Are you suggesting that we place our hopes on a child?" another officer asked with skepticism. "I'm suggesting that we place our hopes on humanity's greatest asset," Sarah replied firmly. "Our ability to think, adapt, and survive. Ethan is the key to understanding how we can outmaneuver them. If anyone can help us defeat this invasion, it's him." The room was quiet for a moment, but slowly the others began to nod in agreement. It was a long shot, but the desperation of the situation left no room for doubt. Humanity's survival now rested on a young boy with a brilliant mind, a mind that could think the way no one else could. As the meeting continued, a plan began to form, a plan that would hinge on the unlikeliest of heroes. Ethan would be trained, tested, and given the tools to fight back in a way the invaders would never expect. The humans would not face this threat with numbers or firepower alone. They would face it with their greatest weapon, their ingenuity, their mind, and their will to survive. Back in space, Captain Voctor's fleet continued its journey, blissfully unaware that humanity's secret weapon was already at play. The days that followed were a whirlwind of preparation and uncertainty. As Earth's governments scrambled to strengthen defenses and prepare for the inevitable, a select few began to focus entirely on Ethan, the boy who had become their last hope. In a secret facility nestled deep within a mountain range, a small group of military officers and scientists worked tirelessly, setting up the most advanced training simulations and technology the world had ever seen. Ethan was not only a child, he was a puzzle, a riddle that they needed to solve if humanity stood any chance of winning. Ethan, however, did not need to be told the stakes. From the moment he had been briefed, his eyes had sharpened with an understanding far beyond his years. The other children around him played and laughed, oblivious to the larger threat. But not him. His focus was entirely on the task at hand. He had always been different, yes, but never had he felt the weight of the world so clearly. Still, he welcomed it. He had never shied away from a challenge, and this one was the greatest of all. Inside a room lined with holographic screens, the boy sat before a massive virtual battlefield. The simulation was set to mimic an alien invasion. Ships descending from the stars, overwhelming ground forces, chaos unfolding everywhere. The task was simple in theory: defend the planet at all costs. But the difficulty lay in the unpredictable nature of the scenario. Ethan's mind, however, wasn't just processing the information. It was dissecting, calculating, and devising. He adjusted the controls effortlessly, weaving through thousands of pieces of data at once. His fingers flicked across the console like an orchestra conductor commanding a symphony, each movement deliberate, each tactic carefully crafted. Within moments, the holographic battlefield shifted. Alien ships were destroyed, ground forces were neutralized, and the tide turned in favor of the humans. An observer, Dr. Maria Tressler, a lead scientist in the project, stood behind him, eyes wide with awe. The simulation had been designed to be nearly impossible for anyone, especially someone so young, to master, but Ethan had already cracked it. She had seen brilliant minds before, but this was something different. The speed at which he could adapt to new data, anticipate enemy moves, and use resources in creative ways was beyond comprehension. He wasn't just playing a game. He was analyzing, predicting, and strategizing on levels that even seasoned generals could not hope to match. "How did you do that?" Dr. Tressler asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "The tactics. They're unlike anything I've ever seen." Ethan looked up at her, his face calm and collected, his gaze intense. "I didn't just think of what's going to happen next. I thought about what they'll expect to happen. And then I changed it." Tressler blinked, momentarily stunned. She was used to hearing smart kids, but Ethan's way of thinking, this ability to anticipate and outmaneuver, to understand not only the battlefield but the psychology of the enemy, was nothing short of extraordinary. He wasn't just reacting to situations. He was predicting the future, manipulating it to his advantage. The implications were immediately clear. This was the key to humanity's survival. Ethan was more than just a brilliant child. He was a strategic mastermind, a tactical genius in the making. The alien invaders had underestimated humanity's potential, but they hadn't reckoned with the brilliance of a single human mind capable of seeing the entire war from a new perspective. "Ready for the next simulation?" Dr. Tressler asked, though her voice betrayed a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Ethan nodded without hesitation, his focus never wavering. As the next virtual battle began, a new layer of complexity was added: alien intelligence, advanced weaponry, and unpredictability that would challenge even the most skilled commanders. But Ethan wasn't fazed. Within moments, he was deep into the simulation, analyzing and adapting, thinking 5 steps ahead. As the simulation progressed, a hum of excitement buzzed through the facility. It was clear to everyone in the room. They had found something extraordinary. And while the world outside still waited for the impending invasion, Ethan was quietly becoming the world's most valuable asset. Meanwhile, far above Earth, Captain Voctor's fleet closed in. The final stages of the invasion were imminent, and Voctor, confident in his victory, turned his focus to the final assault plan. He still believed Earth would be crushed effortlessly, unaware that a quiet storm was brewing beneath the surface of the planet. A storm in the form of a child who had the power to change the course of the war. Ethan, without even knowing it, was about to become humanity's last line of defense. The invaders might have underestimated Earth, but they had no idea what was coming. The days blurred into one another as Ethan's training intensified. Every simulation became more complex, more unpredictable, and more challenging. At times, the young boy seemed to lose himself entirely in the simulations, his mind working at a pace that left even the most experienced strategists in awe. Dr. Tressler watched him closely, noting the ease with which he dissected complex alien tactics. He wasn't just reacting to what was in front of him. He was understanding it, predicting it, and dismantling it before it even had a chance to fully materialize. But it wasn't just the technology or the battles that Ethan was mastering. It was the psychology of war. Ethan understood, perhaps better than anyone. That warfare was not just about weapons. It was about the enemy's expectations, their fears, their blind spots. The simulations had become more than just training tools. They had become a playground for Ethan's mind, a space where he could refine his instincts and sharpen his ability to think like the invaders. One afternoon, as Ethan sat in front of yet another battlefield simulation, a deep concern began to form among the humans monitoring him. Ethan had completed dozens of simulations flawlessly, often in half the expected time. However, this time something was different. He had entered the simulation as usual, but now he appeared uncertain. The edge that had always been so clear in his eyes was gone. He was still moving swiftly through the complex tactics, but his movements seemed to lack the usual confidence. Dr. Tressler watched closely, noting his slight hesitation. "Ethan, is something wrong?" she asked, approaching him carefully. He didn't respond immediately. His fingers hovered over the controls, and for the first time, Dr. Tressler saw a flicker of doubt in his expression. "I'm not sure," he finally said, his voice small. "I don't know how to beat them this time." "Who?" she asked, concern growing in her voice. "The aliens," Ethan replied, not taking his eyes off the screen. "I can't think like them anymore. They're too unpredictable. I can't figure them out the way I used to." Dr. Tressler's heart skipped a beat. The child had been right up until now. Every tactic, every move had been planned and executed with such accuracy that it almost felt like he was reading the enemy's mind. But now he was saying that he couldn't even predict their next step. How could that be possible? She bent down beside him. "Ethan, you've been able to predict everything up until now. What makes you think you can't predict them now?" Ethan looked up at her, his brow furrowed with confusion. "I thought the aliens were predictable, but they aren't. They don't fight like any army I've studied. It's almost like they don't care if they lose some ships or soldiers. They just keep coming. They're not trying to win in the way I thought they would. They're playing a different game." Dr. Tressler stood in stunned silence. The alien fleet was sophisticated, yes, but why would they behave in such an unpredictable manner? This wasn't the war of calculated tactics they had anticipated. The aliens' methods were unconventional, strange, and in a way they seemed to be learning from every human counterattack, adapting in real time. As Ethan worked through the simulation, the data fed into his mind, and slowly, like a storm clearing after a long night, the answer began to emerge. "They're not fighting to win," Ethan said slowly, realization dawning in his eyes. "They're fighting to adapt. Every move we make, they learn from it. They want us to show them how we think, how we fight. That's the real battle." Dr. Tressler's breath caught in her throat. Ethan was right. The invaders weren't merely trying to defeat humanity. They were studying them, learning how they fought, how they reacted under pressure. They had been preparing for this invasion for years, perhaps longer, and they were evolving with every moment. Humanity was not just facing an external enemy. They were facing an intelligence that adapted faster than they could predict. The true nature of the battle had just revealed itself. It wasn't going to be about who had the biggest ships or the deadliest weapons. It would be a battle of minds, and the aliens were already playing on a level far beyond anything Earth had prepared for. "Then we have to be smarter," Dr. Tressler said, her voice steady, a new resolve forming in her mind. "We can't fight them the way they expect us to. We need to be more unpredictable than they are." Ethan's eyes shone with determination. He didn't need anyone to tell him that humanity's future was riding on this battle of wits. This time, it wasn't just about fighting back. It was about outsmarting an enemy that had no intention of fighting fairly. And the countdown to the final battle was already beginning. The gravity of the situation sank deeper with every passing day. The invaders had begun their descent, their massive fleet looming above Earth like an unstoppable storm. Captain Voctor's confidence had only grown since the first strike. To him, this was merely another conquest, another planet to be subdued and absorbed into the ever-expanding empire. What he didn't know, what no one could have predicted, was that Earth wasn't going to fall as easily as he expected. In the hidden underground facility, where Ethan and his team had been working tirelessly, the final stages of preparation were underway. The simulations had become more advanced, more unpredictable, and now, for the first time, humanity's strategy was shifting. It wasn't about simply defending anymore. It was about outwitting the enemy, using the invaders' own methods against them. Ethan had spent countless hours analyzing the aliens' tactics, dissecting every piece of data, learning their patterns. He had come to understand something that no one else had realized. The invaders weren't trying to conquer the planet in the way humanity had always imagined. They didn't just want victory. They wanted information, an understanding of human tactics, how humanity would react under stress. They were studying Earth's strategies, adapting faster than anyone thought possible. And now, Ethan knew how to fight back. It was a new kind of warfare, a war of the mind, not just the battlefield. With the final preparations in place, Sarah Cross and her team gathered in the command center. It was quiet, the calm before the storm, but there was a nervous energy in the air. They knew what was coming, but they also knew that the strategies they had relied on in the past were no longer enough. This wasn't just about fighting back. It was about surviving an enemy that could adapt to every move they made. As the holographic map of Earth's defenses flashed before them, Sarah's mind raced. They had learned from the simulations, from Ethan's analysis. The enemy would expect a traditional defense, human forces lined up in neat formations, predictable strategies. But that was exactly what the invaders wanted, to see how the humans would react, to learn from every misstep and counterattack. They couldn't fight them that way. "We need to bait them," Sarah said, her voice sharp with determination. "We'll set traps, draw them into positions where they'll be forced to overextend themselves. Then we'll strike unpredictably. We can't let them learn from us. The more chaotic the battle, the better." Her words hung in the air as the team absorbed them. They had no choice. The invasion was imminent, and if they played this like any other war, they would lose. Ethan's mind, the brilliant boy who had been the linchpin of their strategy, had taught them one invaluable lesson. Predictability was their greatest enemy. The invaders had a strength that the humans couldn't match: adaptability. But they also had a weakness. They could only adapt to what they saw. "We're not just defending Earth anymore," Sarah continued. "We're setting a stage. Every battle will be a puzzle, a challenge. We'll make them think we're weaker than we are, and then we'll strike when they least expect it." The team nodded, absorbing the plan. It was risky, but it was their only shot. Meanwhile, across the globe, the world's military forces began to position themselves, ready to engage the invaders, but all under the watchful eye of one mind, one boy who had seen more of the alien forces than anyone else. High above in the alien fleet, Captain Voctor's confidence had grown. His flagship, the Gorgon, was positioned at the forefront of the invasion. He could see Earth's defenses being hastily thrown together below, its military forces scattered across the globe, their response frantic and disorganized. It was all according to plan. But as the fleet descended further into Earth's atmosphere, Voctor's mind began to shift. Something felt different this time. It wasn't just the usual resistance. No, this time, there was something more calculated, more unpredictable. His eyes narrowed as he observed the strange movements of Earth's forces on his command screen. It wasn't the orderly defense they had expected. Ships were darting across the skies in erratic patterns, forces shifting positions too quickly for normal human military tactics. There was no clear structure, no set formation. The humans were playing a different game. And for the first time, Voctor felt a stirring of doubt. He had always been able to anticipate his enemies' moves, to crush them before they could think. But this was different. These humans weren't just reacting. They were anticipating his every move. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were already one step ahead. In the heart of the command center, Sarah Cross watched the feeds from Ethan's simulation as the first wave of alien ships entered Earth's atmosphere. Her pulse quickened. The time for preparation was over. The moment of reckoning had arrived. And Earth's final defense wasn't going to be a conventional war. It was going to be a battle of wits, a battle to outthink, outsmart, and outmaneuver the invaders at every turn. For the first time, the humans had an edge. Now it was time to see if they could turn the tide. The first wave of the invasion had arrived. Vokter's fleet, a formidable force, cut through the skies above Earth like a storm, casting shadows over entire continents. The alien ships hovered over cities, their presence undeniable, a terrifying reminder of humanity's vulnerability. The world watched in fear as the invaders prepared to strike. But something was different. The humans, instead of succumbing to panic, were responding in ways that defied the alien commander's expectations. It was clear. Earth wasn't rolling over. On the ground, Sarah Cross and her team were already seeing the fruits of their plan. The so-called chaos they had introduced into their defenses wasn't the kind of disorder that invited defeat. It was deliberate. Every move they made, every maneuver, was designed to confuse and mislead the invaders, to make them think they were fighting an army of disarray. Ships veered off course, military installations were abandoned at key moments, and soldiers executed counterattacks that looked like failures, only to turn into deadly traps once the aliens took the bait. Sarah stood in the command center, her eyes glued to the monitors, watching the alien ships respond. They were confused. The fleet that had once seemed invincible was now floundering, chasing ghosts, second-guessing every move they made. "It's working," one of the officers murmured, his voice almost disbelieving. Sarah nodded. "But we need to keep them off balance. Don't let them adjust." Elsewhere, Ethan had been watching the battle unfold, sitting in a room surrounded by his simulations and tactical displays. For the first time, the edge of uncertainty he had felt earlier was gone. He was beginning to understand their strategy. The invaders had expected a straight-up fight. They had expected the humans to line up in neat, predictable formations, just as any traditional army would. But humanity wasn't like that. They weren't just fighting. They were fighting unpredictably. As the simulations had shown, the aliens thrived on patterns, but humans had something they could never replicate: instinct. Where the aliens calculated, the humans acted on gut feeling, throwing their enemies into confusion by doing the unexpected. And it was working. Ethan clenched his fists as he watched the battle intensify. He had seen enough in the simulations to know what the next move had to be. The invaders' fleet was beginning to separate, reacting to the apparent weakness of Earth's forces in different regions. It was time to capitalize on that disarray. He quickly tapped into the comms system, connecting with Sarah. "They're starting to spread out," he said, his voice calm, but urgent. "It's a sign they're trying to adapt. They'll try to counter our trick by focusing their forces. We need to hit their fleet's command ship, destabilize their leadership." Sarah's eyes narrowed as she processed the information. She could see what Ethan meant. If they struck the heart of the alien fleet, they could disrupt the entire invasion. Voktar and his officers would be thrown into chaos, and without their command structure intact, the invaders would lose their cohesion. "Make it happen," Sarah ordered, her voice resolute. Within minutes, Earth's forces shifted once more, their attention now focusing on the flagship, the Gorgon. The human fleet had been hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right moment. Now, they were striking with precision, like a predator pouncing on a wounded prey. Meanwhile, high above the Earth's atmosphere, Captain Voktar stood on the bridge of the Gorgon, staring out at the chaos unfolding below. What was once an effortless invasion had turned into a tangled web of confusion. The humans were unpredictable, too unpredictable. His fleet was becoming disjointed. They had underestimated Earth's ability to respond, but now the situation was becoming critical. "Captain," an officer called out urgently, "human ships are converging on the flagship. They're aiming for the Gorgon." Voktar's eyes narrowed as he processed the information. They're targeting our command center. For the first time since the invasion began, doubt crept into Voktor's mind. If they lost the Gorgon, if their flagship fell, their whole invasion would collapse. The humans had targeted the heart of their operation. Divert forces, Voktor snapped, his voice laced with urgency. Do not let them reach the Gorgon. But it was too late. The human forces, using every trick in the book, had already created enough of a distraction to breach the outer defenses of the flagship. They were closing in, and Voktor's fleet was scrambling to protect the most critical part of the invasion. Back on Earth, Sarah watched the feeds with a growing sense of satisfaction. The Gorgon was under siege. The invaders were losing control. They had underestimated not just the humans' ability to fight, but their ability to adapt. Now we finish this, Sarah said, her voice steady as the world's forces closed in on their final strike. The battle had shifted. The invaders had come to conquer, but the humans had found a way to outthink, outmaneuver, and outlast them. The true war had just begun. The battle in the skies above Earth raged on, but the tide had irrevocably shifted. Voktor's once proud fleet was in disarray, the Gorgons surrounded by human ships like predators closing in on a wounded prey. It wasn't the fierce assault that the aliens had anticipated. It wasn't an overwhelming force of ships. No, this was a carefully crafted, unpredictable strike that had caught them completely off guard. Sarah stood in the command center, watching the chaos unfold across multiple screens. Her hands trembled slightly, but not from fear. This was exhilaration. The humans had done it. They had struck at the heart of the invaders' fleet, and now every movement was a test of the aliens' ability to adapt. But unlike the early stages of the invasion, when the humans had been scrambling to respond, the aliens were now the ones on the defensive. We've got them on the run, one of the officers said, his voice tinged with disbelief. Their command ship shields are failing. Their fleet is fractured. Sarah nodded, her eyes fixed on the holographic map. The Gorgon was surrounded, but still alive, barely. Alien ships fired back, but the humans were too quick, too cunning. Earth's forces had been moving in unexpected patterns, drawing the invaders into kill zones and then vanishing before they could retaliate. It was exactly what they needed. We need to push harder, Sarah said, her voice cool and focused. We can't give them time to regroup. Prepare for another wave. Target their engines. We can't let them escape. Meanwhile, far above Earth, Captain Voktor stood on the bridge of the Gorgon. His fists clenched as the battle unfolded before him. The humans were relentless, every move designed to keep him off balance. His fleet, once an unstoppable force, was now crumbling around him. The flagship was losing power, and his best officers were frantically trying to maintain order amidst the chaos. But it was clear, Earth wasn't surrendering. It was fighting back with a ferocity Voktor hadn't expected. Sir, we've lost contact with 2 more fleets, one of the officers reported, panic creeping into his voice. Our forces are fragmented. The humans are everywhere. Voktor gritted his teeth. We cannot let this happen. We will not be defeated by these primitive creatures. But even as he spoke, he knew it was already too late. The invasion wasn't going according to plan. The humans had turned the tables on him in a way he couldn't comprehend. And the more he tried to regain control, the more the situation spiraled out of his grasp. Captain, we're being targeted, another officer shouted. Their ships are locking onto our engines. Voktor turned sharply, his eyes narrowing. No, this couldn't be happening. Earth's forces had somehow anticipated his every move, and now they were attacking the heart of his operation. The Gorgon's engines were its lifeblood. The moment they were disabled, the flagship would be dead in space. We have to disengage. Now. Voktor barked, his voice booming across the bridge. Move all available ships to protect the engines. But as he issued the orders, the damage was already done. A series of blasts from Earth's fighters tore into the Gorgon's rear, disabling its engines and sending the massive vessel into a slow, spiraling descent. It was no longer a command ship. It was a hulking carcass drifting helplessly in the vacuum of space. On Earth, Sarah's eyes gleamed with determination. The flagship was crippled. Vokter's pride and joy was now a floating wreck. And with that, the entire invasion force was in jeopardy. The human forces, previously underestimated, had turned the enemy's greatest strength into their weakness. Sarah glanced at the tactical map. The alien fleet was splintering, its once proud ships now scattered in every direction as Earth's forces closed in from all sides. But there was still one more hurdle to overcome. Vokter himself. He's not going to just give up, Sarah murmured, more to herself than anyone else. He'll fight until the very end. Do we target the Gorgon's command center? One officer asked, already preparing the next set of coordinates. No, Sarah replied sharply. We need to focus on the rest of the fleet. Vokter is a symbol of their pride. If we take down their remaining forces, the rest will collapse. This is bigger than one ship. She turned to Ethan, who had been watching the battle unfold on a separate screen. He had been eerily quiet since the battle had turned in their favor. Now he looked up at her, his eyes filled with a clarity beyond his years. They won't surrender, he said softly, his voice unwavering. But we can make them question everything. If we destroy enough of their fleet, they'll retreat. They'll have no choice. Sarah nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. Then we finish this. And so, with a final coordinated strike, Earth's forces swarmed the alien fleet, targeting their remaining ships with surgical precision. Each move brought the humans closer to victory, closer to the end of an invasion that had seemed inevitable mere days ago. Vokter's invasion was crumbling, and Earth had proven that when it came to survival, humanity would always rise. The final assault was swift and brutal. Earth's forces, once scattered and unprepared, now moved like a well-oiled machine, honed by weeks of struggle and fueled by the unexpected brilliance of a young boy who had seen through their enemies' every move. The alien fleet, shattered and divided, was no match for the relentless pursuit of humanity's remaining strength. Captain Vokter stood on the shattered bridge of the Gorgon. His fists clenched as he watched his forces crumble around him. The once proud invader had lost the element of surprise, lost his fleet, and now stood on the precipice of total defeat. Earth's forces were everywhere, circling, closing in. It was over. He could feel the weight of it bearing down on him. His officers, panicked and defeated, tried to hold the line, but it was futile. The flagship was drifting in space, its engines gone, its command structure broken. His best ships had already been destroyed, and the remnants of his fleet were scattering in retreat. We've lost, Vokter muttered under his breath, his voice hollow. The confidence that had once radiated from him was now replaced with something deeper, darker. Regret. He had underestimated Earth. He had underestimated its resilience, its ability to fight back, not with sheer power, but with cunning. The humans had turned every advantage he thought he had into a weakness. His empire, his conquest, was slipping through his fingers. On Earth, Sarah Cross watched the final stages of the battle unfold from the command center. The invaders were retreating, their forces in disarray, their command ship broken. The tension that had gripped the room for so long was beginning to ease. The war was almost over, but it had come at a cost. We did it, one of the officers said, almost in disbelief. Sarah took a deep breath. The war had been hard fought. Thousands of lives had been lost, and the world would never be the same. But in the end, humanity had stood tall. The invaders who had thought they could conquer the Earth had been outsmarted, outmaneuvered by a planet that refused to surrender. Beside her, Ethan stood quietly, his eyes fixed on the screen. His young face was calm, but there was something about the way he held himself that showed the depth of what he had just helped achieve. He had been their secret weapon, their genius strategist, the one who had seen the way through the maze of the alien invasion. And now, as the last of the invaders' ships scattered into space, Ethan's focus remained on the bigger picture, humanity's future. "Will they come back?" Sarah asked, turning to him. Ethan glanced at her, his expression serious. "They might, but we'll be ready next time." Sarah nodded. She had known that, deep down, this victory wasn't just about defeating an enemy. It was about proving to the universe that Earth wasn't weak. Humanity had risen from the brink of destruction and shown that they could think, adapt, and survive. As the alien fleet disappeared into the stars, the silence in the command center was palpable. The war was over, but the rebuilding would take time. Earth had won, but the scars of the conflict would linger for generations to come. Sarah looked at Ethan, who was already studying the aftermath, analyzing every detail as if preparing for the next challenge. "Thank you," Sarah said quietly, her voice filled with a deep sense of gratitude. "For everything." Ethan looked up at her and smiled faintly. "We did it together," he said simply. "All of us." The war was over. Humanity had fought back against the most powerful force in the galaxy and emerged victorious. But this victory wasn't just about defeating the invaders. It was about proving something more profound. Humanity's capacity to adapt, to learn, to overcome even the most impossible odds. And though the alien invaders had been forced to retreat, the message they had sent to the rest of the universe was clear. Earth was not to be underestimated. As the world began to rebuild, and the stars once again filled the night sky, humanity knew that no matter what came next, they would always rise, together, as one.